US broken policy. The UN Security Council's preparation for a vote on a US proposal to extend an arms embargo on Iran represented a new phase of the Trump administration's aggression towards Tehran.
Next week, the United States will put forward a resolution in the Security Council to extend the arms embargo on Iran. The Security Council's mission is to maintain international peace and security.
The administration has been pressing ahead with plans to push for the extension of the anti-Iran embargo set to be lifted on October 18th under the Iran nuclear deal signed in 2015.
The timetable for the removal of arms restrictions embodied in Resolution 2231 is an inseparable part of the hard-won compromise enabling the JCPOA participants to finally agree on the overall package of the JCPOA and Resolution 2231.
In other words, extending the arms embargo on Iran in whatever form lacks a legal basis and amounts to violation of an internationally backed agreement called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action.
Some Gulf countries have endorsed the extension of the embargo, and that is because they want to please the United States. So they've done what they need to do to get the approval of the United States. However, other countries will be are going to oppose any pressure, and certainly are opposing any pressure the United States is putting on them. This will simply further damage the U.S.'s relations with countries in the region. Those countries do not trust the United States now. They see the U.S. government as manipulative and as wanting to achieve its geopolitical goals despite violations of international law.
Pursuing the anti-Iran campaign comes as the Trump administration struggles to get a hold of its broken foreign policies. Brian Hook, who has been in charge of the country's anti-Iran policy, has stepped down, revealing the chaos in the U.S. broken foreign policy run by former CIA chief Mike Pompeo, an anti-Iran war hawk.
Therefore, what I see is that the abject failure of maximum pressure is now going to be met with a sort of corresponding mass exit. We've got one incompetent ideologue going to be replaced with another incompetent ideologue, albeit one who has a much deeper and longer history, beginning with the blood-soaked policies of the Reagan administration.
Brian Hooks was the point man on Iran. He was a very strong proponent for sanctions, for withdrawal from the JCPOA, for extending the embargo, and yet he has walked away. He has resigned his position. This shows the disarray that U.S. foreign policy is in. Mike Pompeo is completely unqualified for this position. He has no concept of international law, history, or diplomacy. He has no idea about what's required to cause alliances within and between countries. Brian Hook's departure is simply the latest signal that the U.S. foreign policy is a complete failure under Donald Trump.
With the U.S. foreign policy apparatus in tatters, the Trump administration was trying to renew restrictions on selling weapons or related material to or buying them from Iran through introduction of a resolution at the UN Security Council.
ایران به هیچ عنوان تخطی از قطعنامه 2231 رو نخواهد پذیرفت. ایران حق مسلمش هست که به زودی از تحریم تسلیحاتی در چارچوب این قطعنامه خارج بشه.
The UN Security Council ultimately rejected the reintroduction of the Iran arms embargo, marking the biggest U.S. defeat in the history of the world body.
Russia and China voted against the move, while Britain, France, Germany, and 8 other Security Council members abstained. U.S. and the Dominican Republic were the only countries to vote for the draft resolution.
Even U.S. traditional allies Germany, Britain, and France abstained from endorsing the resolution. The vote was a clear response by the international community to the Trump administration's reckless attempt to undermine not just Iran, the international agreement, and the previous U.S. administration, but also the United Nations Security Council itself. To this administration, international world bodies should be either scrapped or taken advantage of to pursue Trump's so-called America First policies. But have the war hawks at the helm of the White House learned their lesson? It's unlikely. President Trump and Mike Pompeo intend to kill the JCPOA before the November election. The UN Security Council vote, though a telltale sign of Washington's global isolation, takes the White House a step closer to an ultimate blow to the international accord. The US Secretary of State has failed once again in his dream of bringing Iran to its knees. Yet he branded the vote as the Council's failure, with only one other vote from the Dominican Republic backing his pro-Israel agenda. Yet, war hawks in charge of the US broken foreign policy are unashamed of the embarrassing diplomatic defeat. Therefore, they are backing themselves for another embarrassment that would basically necessitate reversal of the Trump withdrawal from the international deal. They think it does not matter that the US has quit the JCPOA. They can still invoke a provision built into the nuclear accord to take on Iran, a measure deemed illegal. Using the provision, known as a snapback, Washington is aiming to prohibit not just arms deals, but also oil sales and banking agreements in relation to Tehran.
There is no support in the Security Council for this. This will then set up the next confrontation, which is about the United States seeking to impose so-called snapback inspections that are, part of the Joint Comprehensive Program of Action, which are to be implemented if Iran is found to be in non-compliance. Iran, of course, is not in non-compliance, but the United States is no longer a party to this agreement.
But the US anti-Iran scheme would not end in the Security Council. The US has vowed to attempt to snap back UN sanctions on Iran and push the JCPOA into a crisis. Trump's regional allies such as Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and the UAE also expressed support for the extension of the embargo on Iran. Saudi Arabia, which has voiced concerns about the lifting of the embargo, has itself launched a brutal war on its impoverished neighbor Yemen, where the nation continues suffering from repercussions of Riyadh's aggression.
It is a danger to Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, and I have visited these countries on my trip to the Middle East, and they are saying the same thing in a very loud and clear voice to the UN Security Council.
So this is not going to endear the United States to any nations other than Saudi Arabia and Israel, which the U.S. already has good relations with, despite their terrible records on human rights and adherence to international law. So U.S. pressure on these other countries is not going to benefit the U.S. in any way. But Donald Trump is very short-sighted. He does not see actions and their consequences, so he is proceeding with in this manner, in a manner that will only damage the U.S. reputation around the world.
The U.S. use of a snapback mechanism embedded within the internationally backed Iran deal reveals the depth of U.S. double policies, as Trump unilaterally withdrew from it despite criticism from its allies, as well as Russia and China, signatories to the 2015 agreement. Trump's move to use a pact that he has withdrawn from to pressure Tehran could not be more ironic. The real estate mogul had spoken in opposition to the deal even before his 2016 campaign days.
I've been doing deals for a long time. I've been making lots of wonderful deals, great deals. That's what I do. Never, ever, ever in my life have I seen any transaction so incompetently negotiated as our deal with Iran. And I mean never.
On the other hand, the US president is promising to make Iran come back to the negotiating table a month after his possible re-election. This is while Tehran maintains that it would not negotiate under pressure.
International experts all say that the U.S. government has no standing to cause that snapback to occur. The U.S. withdrew from the JCPOA 2 years ago. It has no participation in it, no involvement in it. It cannot simply decide now that it wants to be involved for the purpose of further punishing Iran. So it's almost laughable, except it's Donald Trump being Donald Trump.
Americans did their best to garner support for the anti-Iran move by traveling to various countries at the highest levels of the State Department, including the Secretary of State himself, during the coronavirus outbreak. Tehran argues that Washington has no legal right to invoke a snapback mechanism to reinstate sanctions against Tehran under the landmark nuclear deal that the US unilaterally quit in 2018.
We need to see a lot of these announcements and moves on the part of Washington as part of sort of the election cycle. We're headed to elections, and President Trump needs to maximize his vote base. He's come under fire on a number of fronts, and his numbers are sagging. So we can't separate the two.
Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif even suggested that the US move is aimed at destroying the Security Council itself. The fact that the US cannot use the mechanism has also been reiterated by Washington's European allies, Germany, Britain, and France. But the effort to kill the JCPOA is intensely pursued by the Israelis and Saudis.
It is about time to re-examine the JCPOA in its entirety, and at that time, all the issues will be on the table, including the boycott, including the arms embargo.
After all, the US has adopted an isolationist policy under Trump by targeting several international agreements and organizations, from the Paris Climate Accord to the World Health Organization.
He's completely incompetent. He withdrew from this deal 2 years ago. He said he wanted nothing to do with it. His spokespeople said the United States is no longer part of the JCPOA. Now he wants to proclaim that the United States is still a part of the JCPOA for the purpose of penalizing Iran. It's a ridiculous position for the United States to be in. Under Donald Trump, this is not unusual.
Killing Social Security. The Trump administration has come under pressure for launching a war on the US Social Security after a blitz of executive orders to suspend payroll taxes. The president signed the orders from his private club in Bedminster, New Jersey.
And we're going to save American jobs and provide relief to the American workers. I'm taking action to provide an additional or an extra $400 per week in expanded benefits. $400, okay?
Trump ordered the Treasury Department to allow the deferment of most workers' Social Security payroll tax payments for the final 4 months of the year.
And this is every week. Every week you get a check, or a month, or biweekly. This is a major amount of money that you're getting directly. So it's really it's a very big number. It's a very substantial number. And this is, don't forget, this is in addition to the $400.
The US president further vowed to make permanent payroll tax cuts if he's re-elected in the November presidential race, a promise made in an apparent effort to promote his 2020 campaign.
Well, to understand what Trump is proposing, you kind of have to understand the way the Social Security system works. It's funded by payments by both the worker and by their employer. And what Trump is now proposing to pay for this, for the epidemic, for the pandemic crisis, is to no longer require payments into Social Security by either the employer or by the employee. He's proposing this as a short-term basis, and it will result in some workers receiving a larger paycheck in a time of great economic crisis.
Deferring the withholding of certain payroll taxes from September through the end of the year means the money that companies would cease to withhold from their employees' earnings would have to be paid next year, barring legislative action.
This weekend, President Trump took executive action designed to provide the relief Democrats have denied to those who need it most. Through 4 executive orders, he took the following steps. On the payroll tax, he deferred payments of the employee portion of certain payroll taxes from September 1st through the end of 2020.
For companies, this would mean more complex accounting maneuvering, while for employees it could mean an unwanted tax bill in 2021. Up to $40 billion a month would be added to the paychecks of Americans, which they will have to pay back later. Trump has been pitching the move as an actual reduction in tax liability, while in reality it's nothing but an offer of a zero-interest loan.
But long term, what it will do, it will cut off funding to Social Security and Medicare. And the Republican agenda and Trump's agenda is to make the end of what they call the payroll tax, the money that goes into Social Security, make that permanent. And so it's a backdoor way of essentially ending Social Security for most Americans, especially if the Republicans win again in November and if Trump wins again in November.
The Republican president, who has not put up a shining performance in dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, is hoping to take political advantage of the situation in an election year.
And now at the end of the year, the assumption that I win, I'm going to terminate the payroll tax, which is another thing that some of the great economists would like to see done. We'll be paying into Social Security through the general fund, and it works out very nicely.
The decision, which also included extension of unemployment benefits, offering federal eviction and student loan relief, has come under criticism not just from Trump's 2020 opponent, Joe Biden, but also from other top Democrats such as House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
The bottom line is this. The Trump administration and Senate Republicans have badly mauled the body politic, the American economy, and American health care. And we believe the patient needs a major operation while Republicans want to apply just a Band-Aid.
As the COVID-19 pandemic keeps taking more lives in the United States, Trump is still failing to grasp the urgency of the health and economic crises facing working families.
The Trump administration, especially since the pandemic, all those divisions have become more acute and have been more visible. And so this is a time of really terrible divisions in the United States. Now we have 150,000 people who have died as a result of the COVID crisis and the inability or unwillingness of the federal government under Donald Trump to really do anything.
Since the taxes provide funding for Social Security, Democrats have taken the chance to erode support among Trump supporters.
Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have chosen to hold this vital assistance hostage on behalf of very extreme partisan demands and the radical left Democrats, and we just can't do that.
With the funding stream for Social Security in jeopardy, the Republican nominee's supporters are reminded of another 2016 campaign promise Trump may be on the path to violate.
I'll save Social Security. I'll save Medicare. Ben Carson wants to get rid of Medicare. You can't get rid of Medicare. You know, Medicare is a program that works. There's fraud, there's abuse, there's waste, but you don't get rid of Medicare. You can't do that. People love Medicare, and it's unfair to them. I'm going to fix it, make it better, but I'm not going to cut it.
The legality of whether the US president can bypass Congress via executive actions to come up with his own tax and spend policies is still under question. However, it's not even clear whether the US Social Security is functioning necessarily in favor of economically vulnerable communities.
This has always been the way in which the wealthy and the ruling circles in America have functioned. They'll take a crisis like the pandemic, like the COVID pandemic, and turn it into a benefit to make it so that those on what we say on Main Street, that the average working folks pay the price, and those on Wall Street, of course, make huge profits at the very time when this crisis is brutally attacking working folks. So there are no promises that Donald Trump makes that he intends to keep.
Trump's move to defer Social Security payroll taxes is aimed at boosting the U.S. vulnerable economy, further weakened by the pandemic. As a consequence of the outbreak, millions of Americans are on the verge of falling into hunger.
First of all, millions of children in our country are food insecure. Our bill addresses that with tens of billions of dollars. Feed the children. The Republican bill has $250,000.
Far too many Americans remain out of work as the economy is sent into a new recession, cancelling out almost all of the employment gains the country has gained in the last 10 years.
Well, first of all, we have no money, so it's not like he went to the rainy day closet and searched for money or the savings account. You don't go over to the Federal Reserve and open a big safe and say, oh, here's all this money I'll pass out to people who are unemployed. We have no money. It has to be borrowed.
The unemployment rate in the United States is higher than at any time in at least the last 70 years.
We've had huge spikes in the number of COVID-related illnesses, and especially those affecting the populations that are most at risk. Those like myself who are elderly, over the age of 65, and those who have already have underlying health issues. Many of those underlying health issues they have as a result of the gap in wealth and the gap between the rich and the poor. The poor here don't have the kind of health care that is one that's just, is a day-to-day thing. Instead, they can only go to an emergency room if they have some kind of catastrophic illness.
There are concerns that the latest executive orders signal that Trump would cut the social safety net and break a promise he made as a candidate in 2016 not to touch Social Security and Medicare.
What the president did is, I agree with the Republican senator said, it was unconstitutional slop. While it has the illusion of saying we're going to have a moratorium on evictions, it says, I'm going to ask you, the folks in charge to study if that's feasible. While he says he's going to do the payroll tax, what he's doing is undermining Social Security and Medicare.
Trump's move escalated tensions among the two chambers of Congress, one held by Democrats and the other by Republicans. While the nation is suffering from consequences of the coronavirus pandemic, liberals and conservatives in power keep trading barbs in the highly polarized political arena.
With the presidential election right around the corner, the big question is no longer, will Donald Trump try to cheat? It's now become, how will Donald Trump try to cheat? And with more Americans than ever expected to vote by mail due to coronavirus, it looks like he's zeroing in on his plan.
President Trump is stepping up his effort to discredit mail-in voting as vulnerable to fraud, ramping up attacks on Twitter and on television.
I think mail-in voting is going to rig the election. I really do.
They want to steal an election. That's all this is all about. They want to steal the election.
There is no way you can go through a mail-in vote without massive cheating.
Democrats are pushing to expand mail-in voting and change existing voting laws to make it easier for people to cast ballots at home because of the coronavirus. The president wants his political allies to fight back against that, and they have now pledged $20 million for that effort.
For real? Only Donald Trump is weird enough to have beef with the mail. Every day he's less and less like a president and more like a neighbor in a sitcom. God damn you, mailman!